name is Jim Walker. I'm one of the directors here at Walk 21, and I'm really thrilled that we have here with us today Maria Vassilakou. Not only is Maria one of the board members here at Walk 21 Europe, helping us with the development of this organisation across the European continent, she's also well known as one of the best politicians, I think, for walking we've ever had. And I really wanted to use a little bit of today, Maria, to just discuss with you about why are you so good? You know, how have you managed to achieve so much? And it's not just that we wanted a big appreciation of what you've been doing, not just in Vienna, but in other places in the world now as well. But actually think about inspiration through other politicians, you know, and think about people who maybe need to be persuaded about the walking case, or maybe they are persuaded, but they don't really know what to do or how to act or what to do first. So we're going to have a bit of a conversation for about an hour, if that's okay, and talk through a little bit about what's motivated you and some lessons for other people. So let's get started. Maria, do you want to maybe just introduce yourself and just give us some headlines about what you've done or how you got into politics even? Maybe start with that.
So hi, Jim. Thanks for inviting me to this talk. Now, I have been born and grew up in Greece, and I went to Austria, Vienna, in order to study. So actually I went there as a student, but I stayed. I got engaged into students' politics already, but later in time, I got more and more involved with municipal politics. So in 1996, I was the first non-Austrian born person ever to be elected in Austrian parliament. And yes, then one thing led to the other, and 2010 until 2019, I served as Vienna's vice mayor, responsible for, walking, but beyond walking, let's say, urban design, urban planning, mobility design, climate protection, energy planning, and citizen involvement. And somehow all of these themes, all of these fields of policy are related to walking. So I served 9 years as vice mayor, and meantime I'm working globally as an advisor to cities and organizations, with, of course, respect especially to walking, but also mobility, climate protection, and urban design.
And when you were being a student, was it in a relevant subject? Was it something to do with this, or have you found your sort of academic background useful in your work at all? What did you study?
Well, I have to confess that I studied originally linguistics, which is really far, far removed from what we're talking about right now. Although linguistics do have, let's say, there is a crossroads between linguistics and urban design, if we think especially of semiotics. But without getting all that scientific and abstract, I think that my real passion has always been about cities, about neighborhoods, and about living environments. And this is something that has a lot to do with my childhood. I grew up in Athens, and although you know, in a let's say relatively beautiful and green middle-class neighborhood, what I experienced as a child was let's say, the shrinking of green and open spaces, right? When we moved there with my parents, we had fields, we had olive tree hands, we could go out and play all day until sundown. And year by year, because new houses would be built, it was, you know, it was the suburbs, it was where the city more or less ended, let's put it this way. I experienced what it actually means to see your living environment deteriorating, to experience what it means that you have neighborhoods that are made for cars and not for children anymore, to experience what it means to have noise all the time and polluted air, and a city that has grown up to, well, meantime, 5 million people. So I think that this is something that deep inside me led me to municipal politics. And ever since I came into politics, for me, it was all about life quality and the right of every woman and every man to a good life, and to a good life where they live in their immediate living environment. So I guess this is what actually was my vision when I became vice mayor. It was the idea of transforming cities to provide maximum life quality for everybody that can be afforded by everybody, which then actually leads you directly to the living environment in the public realm.
Yeah, I think this is really interesting because life quality, I don't know any government in the world that has a life quality department, and yet it's the sort of thing that we all are striving for. And of course, departments are often divided up into planning and engineering and health, all sorts of understandable sort of structures, and this can be quite difficult for issues like walking and life quality. You talked about a department that sort of brokered across some of these issues. The political currencies at the moment, we would observe, we've often talked about road safety, we talk about public health, equity, accessibility, transport, mobility, most recently climate, is coming to the attention. What would you say is the best way to hang the walking agenda? Do we need to sort of absorb all of these things, or are there some that stick out more than others politically, where we could be a particular champion with walking?
Well, I have to confess, I think regardless what your starting point is, all ways lead to walking in a way. Let's start with perhaps defining life quality, because everybody tends to speak about it, but never actually explains what they really mean with it. In my case, I always said it's about a city that's good for children. Because what we long for our children is what we long for ourselves as well. And this is, we want them to grow up in a healthy and safe environment. We want them to be able to move around freely and play and have access to nature and play with water. All these things that you can never find and never do at the heart of our cities. So my idea was, we have to do it the other way around. We have to provide all of this at the heart of our cities when creating new urban quarters, which then of course means that it changes your policy when it comes to urban design and how to build new urban quarters and how to do master planning. But also when transforming the already built city, which leads you directly to the street, and realizing that the street is the only space available for urban life in a city, which then inevitably means that you have to deal, of course, with mobility and with public transport and with all different modes of mobility, and most predominantly with walking, because in the end, transforming streets for walking is transforming streets for life and transforming cities into places for life. So in my case, and what I actually always suggest to teams that I'm working together with, is that we actually focus on the street and realize that space in cities is a limited edition, and that the only way to gain space for outdoor activities, for enjoying life, for walking, is to reallocate it. So you really need to think about mobility and to take space away from cars as it is allocated today, and to reallocate it for other uses.
I remember when we were together and we walked down, I think it's called Marillastrasse, excuse my German there, but it was one of these streets. Yeah, thank you. It was one of those streets where shopkeepers were complaining to you, weren't they, that you were going to pedestrianize it, and they were really angry. at you. And I think even at one point you had to have a bit of a guard with you because you were concerned about some threats, which can't be easy as a politician. And yet, a few months later, once that pedestrianisation had happened on that street, as I remember it was other shopkeepers on other streets saying, why haven't you done our streets? Because they're benefiting and they want to assume the same benefits. This stuff isn't easy being a politician, is it? How do you ride these storms? Did you see that there was going to be this? Should you always expect there to be people shouting at you? Can you get through that? Or, there's a lot of talk at the moment about being popularist and only going once we've got consensus and working out once everybody's on board. Do you have to wait, or can you lead by sort of seeing a vision that's longer term going to be better for people?
Well, I think that, okay, now you're asking me something that is a little bit tough for me to provide an answer to, but I will try my best, okay? I think that there is two different kinds of politicians. I mean, most probably more, but let's say two main categories. One of them is the ones who want to do something, and the other one is the ones who want to be something. So if you just want to be something or somebody, then of course you will look into mainstream and you will try to do only things that are popular, which may be a way of success for you individually, but does not get things done, does not produce or deliver anything, really. The other kind are the ones who want to do something. These are people with a vision, and most hopefully also with competent teams that will help them deliver. And these are the ones who have to go through controversy. They have to learn to deal with controversy, because once you start changing things, there are people that benefit from it, but in many cases don't yet know that they're going to be benefiting. And there are many people that will be fearing disadvantages from change and will be, of course, opposing to it fiercely. And this is beyond, all political games that are played in parliaments between parties. And this means that you are very well advised to have done solid research so that you know what you're doing and where you're heading. Because the worst thing is to go through controversy and do something, and once you've done it, find out that it's been a terrible mistake, right? So in our case, example given in Vienna, remember that we looked into how walking improves actually the situation especially for shopping and for local trade. And we had the data. We knew that what we're doing is going to be benefiting shop owners, example given. So we knew that once the pedestrianization project has been completed, it's going to work out for their benefit. And that helps, of course, dealing with controversy. I would not advise anybody to go into controversy blindly without really having done their homework as to where this all will be leading.
I think it's an interesting point about data, isn't it, really? And knowing your case, as you say. I remember, I think it was Bloomberg who said to Janet Sadiq-Khan in New York, keep 51% of people with me, and you've got a free reign to do what you like. And of course, they achieved a huge amount. But I thought it was a very good starting point. Maybe that's it. But as you say, it means you've got to understand the science and really know what to invest in. When you were in Vienna, I remember you saying that you wanted to increase modal share. You wanted more people to walk. And we did do that with a year of walking and a celebration of things rather than necessarily lots of investment in projects on the ground. We did manage to increase walking. But the other thing that I think made you quite unique was that you said you wanted people to increase their satisfaction about walking, that somehow or other people had forgotten about walking and forgotten how nice it is to walk in Vienna. And you wanted to raise their appreciation and value of it. I think this is something very, very interesting. Could you just talk a little bit about value. These sort of things are a bit harder to measure sometimes, satisfaction and appreciation of walking. Why did you do that? And do you think that's something that other people could learn from, to put satisfaction as a value in the way that they decide their metrics for success?
Well, yet again, it all has to do with the idea of creating cities, transforming cities into places for life. So if you want people to get out of their cars and use their feet, it has to be fun. So you have to look into what is it that we actually all appreciate when we decide to go for a walk. So again, we did our homework and we found out that what people say that they need in order to go for long walks is they need shaded, broad sidewalks, at least sidewalks. They love to walk through parks. They love to walk through squares. They love to walk through, let's say, traffic-calmed public spaces. They like seating. They need water, for example, given along the way. And by the way, they also appreciate it if there's a piece of art, or perhaps a music festival, or something to experience. The goal for was to create long walks throughout the entire city, where you know that you can enter this, let's say, walking corridor, let's call it pedestrian boulevard, which will take you all the way across the city, and to create several of them that will lead, of course, in strategic directions and will connect green spaces, public spaces, pedestrian zones, squares, institutions, whatever is important for everyday life with each other. And it works, because at the moment that I know that I can start walking, but there is a beautiful thing to experience and to see, and it's shaded, and I will find a bench where I can sit as soon as I get tired, and then I can continue. This is what people actually need in order to decide to use the feet.
And actually, we've studied this. We know that most of the main walking cities in the world, Vancouver, Barcelona, Copenhagen, they've all done these networks of greenways or walking routes, and actually made them places where everything is right, and connected up. All these little factors that really make a nice experience. I think that's really interesting, but it can't be hard to write into a policy. It can't be easy to write into a policy, and even harder to deliver, presumably, because you're needing to talk to departments that might be about art. You've got public works, you've got planners, you've got housing, you've got education. What we're seeing internationally now is many departments are having to work across all these different areas, bring people together into multidisciplinary teams. It's almost like a whole government approach, isn't it? Does that take time to put into policy? And is it about who leads that? Do you need a politician leading it, or is it about somebody in a department who ultimately has to write all this stuff down and knock heads together?
Well, I think you need several things. First of all, you need a vision, of course, and you need strong leadership. But by saying strong leadership, I don't mean autocratic leadership. I mean somebody with a strong will and a strong vision that will bring people together from different departments, but not only different departments, from different parts of society, and will steer the process in a way that we don't lose focus. Because if you have multi-stakeholder processes, the most important thing is, of course, to have somebody that will track process and see to it that we don't lose focus. Then, of course, we need, I think, and this is imperative to being able to deliver later, to design the action plan jointly in a collaborative process involving all stakeholders. And why are you well advised to do so? Because it's not just about lists of projects, right? This could also be a wish list for Santa Claus if people don't identify with it, which then means that you will need to have a list of projects in the end, including who is responsible for what, and how it's going to be financed. So if you involve all crucial and relevant stakeholders straight from the beginning in the design process, then you arrive at an action plan that will be known to everybody, where everybody will have collaborated in creating it, and where everybody will know what their role is specifically in this. Rather than having an expert doing it in one department or at a university, and then trying to make people in administration to read a coffee table book, right? Which they never will. So then I think it is imperative that you always have a financing plan to go with it. So never do an action plan without thinking about the budget and arriving at something, let's say, that will not only have the list of projects, but also where the money will come from, how much it will cost, okay, and what is the period of time within which projects have to be delivered. And last but not least, I think what is extremely important is to also think about an implementation plan, which means trying to transform a city may take 10, 15, 20 years. So you're very well advised to think precisely about where and how to start. You will need emblematic projects, but you will also need what I call quick wins. So small projects that can be delivered very quickly and very easily, but will produce an impact, especially if they're combined with each other. So you need to think in networks. And I always say think networks in terms of a network of people and stakeholders that you have involved in the strategy, but also a network of projects, because it's not the single project that will produce the impact. The impact always is the result of a combination of several projects, right? And last but not least, you need to think also about the local level. Now, there are many, many different approaches to this, and most of them, I think, are successful. But the one I usually choose to take is to first think of the city in its entirety at the municipal level, and to then translate action to the local level, and translate a municipal plan into 100, 100, 50, 20 local plans. It all depends on the size of the city. Because in the end, it is our neighborhood and our direct living environment where we will actually experience change and transformation, and where we will appreciate what is happening in terms of how it changes our everyday life and how it improves it. Which then leads us in the end to your question from before about satisfaction. When you start transforming a city, there's a paradoxic situation. In the beginning, satisfaction drops because, and this happens in many, many cases, because people either will take a time to adapt to the new situation, or what is even better, you create higher expectations, and people will turn to be unhappy because they suddenly see, oh, but over there we could improve something, and over there as well, and over there as well. And suddenly everything you're doing is just not enough. But within a period of approximately 5 years of time, everybody has adapted to the new situation. And if you are into local transformation and into activating local communities and into providing, example, given small grants to people so that they can do their own projects to transform the face of their neighborhoods, you may experience that the face of a city changes completely within a period of 5 years.
It's really helpful to have this timescale. When we've been looking at policies, we see many of the policies are 15 to 20 year, they sort of imagine to actually deliver at a national level. And I wanted to ask you about that, because you talk about finances, and I think it's a really important point, obviously. What is the role of national government? What we're seeing around the world is more and more people developing national policies for walking. originally they used to say this is a local issue, it's nothing to do with national governments. But clearly this is changing. What do you see? You've talked about the local and the municipal level. What about the role of national government?
Well, I think it's all about multi-level governance and arriving at a situation where optimally the national level, the regional level, the municipal and the local level are working together. And this is imperative because most of the times funding is with the national level, at least up to a certain degree. Then decision powers may be with the regional level. And then again, like in the case of Vienna, the last say about whether a street will be pedestrianized or not is with the local level. So it's not even the city government that can take the decision to transform streets. It is the local mayor with the local parliament of a district, of a borough, we would say in London, right? To take this decision. So realizing that you need to involve all these levels of government already into the process of designing a policy for a city is, example given, very important. Otherwise, you end up with national strategies that may or may not be adopted by the regional level, or wonderful local strategies that will never be funded.
Yes, exactly. I think that's a really good point. That's exactly where we are with lots of places, isn't it?
Yes, yes. And this is why I'm saying, it's so important to have national policies, but it's also so important to advise governments that are embarking in this process to please involve the local level in a proper way in designing them. Yes, in order to arrive exactly at these collaborative policies that will be brought to life.
Thinking about delivery then, I mean, I think this is really helpful to understand this role between national, municipal, local, as you say, but let's get into the making it happen. What you did in Vienna, I seem to remember, was you set up an agency, slightly independent actually of the existing structures, and said, you're going to be responsible for walking and cycling. I think you gave them a budget for 5 years, created a new team, had a slightly separate office, I think, even from the normal, from the way that the council operated. Why did you do that? And did that help ultimately with delivery sort of being faster or something? Why not just go with an existing department and sort of make them responsible?
Well, institution building, I think, is a very important point that you're touching upon, especially when it has to do with walking. Or let's take another area that is like walking, climate protection, climate mitigation. These are policies that actually touch upon practically the work of every department in a city. So it is very difficult to press them, to squeeze them into one department and to have this department lead the process. Because, let's address it openly, administrations have their traditions and their specific cultures, and, people are people, and you may end up having a very complicated situation where it takes ages until, let's say, a bit of a concurrent situation and the very personal situations between staff are being sorted out. So you may be well advised as well to create an agency that will be, though, example given as in the case of Vienna, 100% owned by the city, and that where you can put actually all competent staff and all resources that you need. And I think that what is in favor of such a way is that it is so much more flexible and quicker in getting things done. But what is also very important is that this agency is not experienced by administration and by the departments of the city as the super guys that have come now to explain the world to us, but actually as an agency that will support them in implementing things. So I think that the way to go about it, the best way to go about it, is to have a flexible, small, but very competent entity that will steer the process, that will work together with all the different departments, that will actually support them in implementing things and getting things done. But in the end, to never forget that you will need people from administration and from all the departments as well. Otherwise, you don't get anything done.
Absolutely. Yeah. They can't do anything without all that network, can they? As you come back to that point. And so financially, was that budget, where did that money come from? Did it come from different departments all put something in to create this agency, or did you find a new budget for this? How did that work?
Well, actually, in the case of Vienna, the municipal budget is subdivided, of course, according to areas, and per year you have a specific amount that is not allocated to departments, but can be flexibly used. So as example given, in order to finance, provide the budget example given for pedestrianization projects, right? So you can actually allocate parts of this money also to create an agency, to steer processes, to have external experts help, etc. And it is, I think, very important also that if you can afford this, you do not take money away from departments.
Yes.
Not only because they won't be happy about it, which is clear, but also because you will need this money later in order to deliver projects. So trying, to access additional funding in order to create a new agency is always very helpful if you can make it.
Yeah, what we've heard about recently in Portugal, and I think also in Greece to an extent, are these sort of green funds being set up by governments. I think there used to be, people used to talk about using parking fines, and that budget was something that didn't necessarily have to be allocated to something and could be used more positively. We heard about that in Hong Kong as well, when they were putting in sort of clean air policies, they wanted to use that income of fines for motorists to actually do something very positive. Are green funds the future? These are places where people have either done something wrong or they're doing something right, but you're somehow or other making the money for green initiatives. This seems to be something that walking is really benefiting from.
Yes. I think that, okay, I'm sorry. Can we return to more or less what you said right now? Because I kind of lost track.
Okay, so I wanted to think about the Green Fund and maybe tell us about the Green Fund in Greece, because this is a relatively new initiative where money is being put for positive things for the environment, and walking is potentially a real benefit from this. This is something that Athens, the place where you grew up, where you said you'd witnessed that change, that deterioration. Is this the sort of place where money could be spent to bring the city back to life, improve that life quality again?
I think the Green Fund, as in the case of Greece, is an excellent example of what I have been talking about just before, which is to allocate a specific sum for purposes that will have to do with, example given, climate mitigation, walking, quality of life improvement, and to do this beyond what is already in ministries or departments, because the Green Fund in Greece is not instead of the different ministry programs, it is in addition. And then ministries may choose to provide funding through their own calls, or they may choose to put the money into the green fund and have the green fund issue a call. In any case, it is very important to create these additional, I always call them pockets of money. But once they have been created, it is also very important that they can be easily accessed by cities without, dealing with horrendous bureaucracy. Because this is, I am afraid, also a reason why in many cases national governments or even the European level may be actually willing to provide considerable funding for good purposes and projects, but may find out that cities are very reluctant to apply because they would need like a small army of staff only to deal with this bureaucracy. So the answer is, well, yes, it is always a good idea to produce a fund and additional funding, but you really have to make it easy for cities to access.
So let's think about imagine we've got the money then, we've got this agency where you've helped us with a sense of emblematic projects, quick wins, local things. Can you give us a flavor of the sorts of initiatives that you think, any city could do or any national government could fund, that would be definitely beneficial to this sort of walking element, the life quality that we're joining up with this investment in walking? Maybe some examples of the sorts of things.
Yes, I will provide two examples. And I think that you're going to be surprised because both of these examples are very simple things. You see, yes, infrastructures are important. So once we embark into transforming a city towards a walkable place for life, we will need to think about public transport and invest in public transport, which is heavy and expensive infrastructures that take years to be created. We will need to embrace the idea of shared space and pedestrianizations and producing broader sidewalks and planting thousands of trees. And all of this means time. Okay, it means, of course, considerable funding. And it also takes staff and 5 to 10 years, in terms of, the time frame to get it done with. So what do you do in the meantime? And here are my two ideas. The first idea is, of course, you need to have a plan. Otherwise, you would be doing random things and produce no impact. But once you have a plan, everything you do for maintenance is an opportunity for transformation. So why, for God's sake, start maintaining streets and then doing it the same way as they were before? And I have several examples of cities that, on the one hand, have created a wonderful strategy for walking, and for some reason, in the same time, you have a street that needs to be maintained, and suddenly, once it's finished, the sidewalks are as broad as they were before. In some cases, they have even taken out the trees, because in many cases, you have old trees on the sidewalks, and there's not enough space for walking. Right? And pedestrians will tend to walk then on the street. This is what happens, example given in Athens very often. But then the way to go about it is to make the sidewalk broader and not take out the tree, right? So every maintenance work is an opportunity for transformation, and you may decide to not only produce broader sidewalks. Why not turn, a stretch of a street into a shared space, example given? So the second piece of advice that I have is, do involve local communities actively. So if you ask me what was the best idea we had in Vienna, that was to introduce a small community grants scheme that actually works simply as providing 4,000 euro subsidy. Actually, not subsidy, it's a grant to anybody who will have an idea as to how to transform a small corner in the neighborhood. Most of the times it's a space occupied by 2 parking cars, and they will create parklets. And what happens is that once you have introduced such a parklet in one street, it kind of spreads all over. Everybody in the neighborhood wants to have the same in their own streets. So you can have, within a very brief period of time and practically on a dime, right? Tremendous impact that will change an entire neighborhood.
It's quite clever, isn't it? Because you're effectively you're giving communities permission to actually make the changes that they want themselves, rather than you forcing it on them. You're giving them a budget and saying you make it how you want to make it, and it works. It works like that.
And it's even better. It feels like home, and it's diverse. Whereas if you had to do it on behalf of administration, you would of course have to do tenders, right, and competitions, and you would have urban designers and architects come. Nothing against them, okay? They're doing a beautiful job for large projects. But why on earth should you go this direction when you could have it much more quickly and efficiently, and again, interesting, because there's a high diversity of the project. So you want to go for a walk because there's so much to see and everything's different. And I just love it.
Yeah, these are 2 really great examples. Thank you for being so practical with us. But when we started this talk, you said how children were really important and a motivation to sort of make sure that we're building cities for children. Many of the initiatives that people do are often focused around the walk to school, thinking about the children's walking element of their school journey. Do you think children is a sort of quick win? Is that something where everybody could focus? Is that something that every city could get on with something? I'm also thinking about the work. I know you're a strong advocate of the needs of women as well. How do you balance all these needs? I mean, you don't really want to leave anyone behind, do you?
Well, in my case, I arrived at realizing that focusing on the needs of children and urban design for children is effectively urban design for all. Because what works best with children is what works best in terms of also gender sensible design. And it's the same that works best, by the way, when it comes to design for the elderly, example given, right? Or people that have temporary or permanent impairments in terms of mobility. So I think that in the end, it's about whatever you name it, let's put it this way. It's not about labels. It's about realizing that we are so different, and that looking into the different needs that we have and looking into what it is, though, that we all have in common, that we all enjoy in common, that we all need, will help you a lot with realizing that the way cities are designed today is not healthy, is very dangerous, example given for children, but also for the elderly. Actually, doing your homework, just take a look into statistics, right? And immediately who are the most vulnerable groups in traffic. But in the end, it is about realizing that I have lost track again. I just can't believe it, but I know where to start. Again. So I think I've made my point, and I wanted to arrive somewhere else right now. And I have to concentrate for just a second. Am I horrible, Jim? Yes, you're horrible.
You're great. No, because you're talking about people. And I like the fact that we always comes back down to people. And do you think, though, when you invest in those grants, those small grants, basically what people are doing, you're enabling people to invest in people, aren't they? They're changing their local environments that will have a definite benefit, coming back to that satisfaction, a benefit to the elderly, the young, etc.
You know what I would like to talk about? I'd like to talk now just a couple of sentences about gender sensible design, and then I would return to children, if you don't mind, and talk about
Okay,
the way
great.
to school, because this is also very practical. Okay.
Yeah.
So in effect, what is good for children in terms of urban design is very similar and directly related to what we mean when we say when we talk about gender sensible design. And I have to also confess that I actually started with gender sensible design and arrived at realizing that in the end, if you focus on children, you will get it done the best way. So there are numerous examples given. There are numerous examples in Vienna how to transform places, focusing on the needs, the different needs of different groups of the population. And I think that the best place to see it are example given parks, where the way you design them is imperative to avoiding conflict between different uses. And you may even design them beautifully in a way that will encourage interaction, which I personally love a lot and will strengthen community ties. And what is also very important to know, because our topic is walking actually, is that if you put such places at the heart of every neighborhood and connect them with each other, we have already arrived at the very essence of a polycentric strategy that will create local centers, will connect them to each other via optimally walkable connections, and will this way manage to transform an entire city in the process of 10 to 15 years. Which then leads me to saying, and how do you do this quickly and simultaneously? Well, by providing small grants to local communities so that you can have work done on every neighborhood in your city, more or less simultaneously, and get things done within a much shorter period of time, right? And I still have not talked about, you can cut all this, right? So I still have not talked about children in school, so I will do this now. And you choose whatever you want from this.
I don't think we're going to cut anything, by the way, but keep going.
Now, when it comes to well, let's say raising satisfaction and also public awareness and winning people's opinions in favor of transforming the city towards walking, I think we have to focus on let's say the trips that children take every day. And of course, the two most important trips are the trips to school and back from school. Now, knowing that children tend to play at every moment of their life, they tend to play also along the way, right? It means that you need to look into the direct vicinity of schools and to introduce traffic calming, at least for a couple of hours every day when school starts and when school ends. So one of the very practical examples of what we did in Vienna and was very successful was to work together with the school to introduce traffic calming in front of the school every morning. Having realized that it was the parents bringing the children to school with their cars that were creating the most dangerous and chaotic situation for the children. So we designed together with parents plus teachers and administration a wonderful project of traffic calming in front of the school that was so successful that in the meantime, we have several schools asking for it. So, and there are other excellent examples from other cities, like I don't know if you've heard of I think it's called the cycling bus, where children, well, parents will bring the children on their bicycles up to a certain point where they can enter a route where children cycle safely to school.
And there's walking buses like this as well now. I've heard of it in other places as well. You've given us a really rich sense, and I'm conscious that we're nearly out of time, actually. I can't believe it's gone so fast. But what you learned, what you did in Vienna, you've now got an organization called Vienna Solutions. You've got a process, you've got an approach, you've got a good narrative here that is something that you are helping now other places to adopt and adapt, I guess, to some extent, to also benefit from this experience. Can you tell us the sort of places you've been and the sorts of things what are people asking for? What do they want? Is it process, or do they want solutions? What is a solution? What is Vienna Solutions? What are you selling people?
So Vienna Solution is actually sharing good concepts, know-how, and sometimes, yes, also solutions, urban solutions with cities across the world. So it's a Vienna-based company, and it is, of course, predominantly also Vienna-based experts that work with me when it comes to assessing the situation in another city, and then working together with them to adapt good concepts, good practices from Vienna to fit, of course, their needs. So if you ask me what it is that I am asked to do most of the times, I'll tell you it's most of the times about the how. It's about transition management. It's not so much about strategy. It's more about how do we deliver this? And so what I tend to do is to also spend time abroad because, looking into the intricacies of each and every administration culture, and also, in this case, a place-based approach to delivering projects is actually what it takes in order to support administrations to get things on the ground. Now, let me give you one example of what I'm doing currently. I have been working in the last months with the city of Athens, advising us to how to translate the Viennese best practice of the so-called neighborhood management offices into the Athenian context. And again, it has a lot to do with what we have been talking about today. It's about realizing that the place to get things done is the neighborhood. And if it's the local level, then you need somebody who will steer it at the local level. So what Vienna did was to introduce local management offices that have actually managed the entire renovation of the historical parts of Vienna within 20 years with high success. And what we're doing right now is to introduce them in Athens, where they will not be managing renovation of buildings, they will be managing the transformation of public space. So
very good, very good.
Perhaps we can see in a couple of years from now, how it works.
But I know people have also rung you from Saudi Arabia, for example, and they said they want to build. I mean, you're talking about retrofitting, I guess, solutions in Athens. But you're also being asked in Saudi Arabia, they said they want to be the most walkable city in the world in 10 years' time. They're building something from scratch. How do you help them? Where do you start with something like that?
Oh, well, Saudi cities are an entirely different story. Basically because in most cases they lack sidewalks altogether. And also because while the climate is arid, they will be lacking shading where it is most needed, which is where people would walk. So what you experience in Saudi cities in many cases is that you have beautiful palm trees, huge ones, but they are in the middle of highways where nobody would walk.
No
So,
shade.
so let's say that it's again all about the basics, as we did in Vienna when we did our homework as to how to encourage walking. It is about creating sidewalks that are continuous. It's about seating. It's about shading. And in the case of Saudi cities, it's about crossings. It's about accessibility, because you have huge, huge sizes of blocks, and it's very difficult to cross because of the numerous highways that have actually cut the cities into pieces, right? And provide practically zero accessibility from one part to the other. But that's a very good question, Jean. It's, as you can see, in different parts of the world, it's always about assessing the very specific situation there, and then focusing on what it is that is needed there. There is no one size fits all approach. But I guess that we all know that.
Thank you so much for sharing and being so generous with your experiences and sharing these thoughts with us. I think it's a really helpful, and I've really enjoyed talking to you. I always do. Last thing then, you're a politician, and you only get one chance to talk to all these other people. Maybe there's a politician sitting on a fence. They've got a policy, but it's not being delivered, like you said, or maybe they've got an idea, but they haven't got any money. What is your number one takeaway that you would say to them how to move forwards? Because this is really where we need to get to, isn't it? Getting things done. I liked your focus on how to get things done. What would you really say to any politician who says, I want to do walking, but I don't know where to start, or I don't know how to fund it? What's your number one thing?
Well, my number one thing would be, do start with a plan, right? But then do let others help you, which then means do activate local communities and do support small and simple things that can be done very quickly. So I always ask, what would you do if you had no decision powers, almost no decision powers, and no money? And start with this. So, example given, introducing a community grant scheme that will support you in changing quickly and easily the face of your neighborhoods can be a very good idea. It costs so little as compared to anything else that you would be doing. And if it's done within a plan, so if you have a basic idea of where you're heading and you integrate all these small actions into a plan, you can suddenly have a tremendous impact, because again, it's the network of actions and projects that produces the impact, rather than one big action, one big emblematic project that may look beautiful but will not change the city in the end. So that's the first thing. And the second thing that I would tell other politicians is, do think about next elections, which then means whatever you do that is controversial, try to do it in the beginning and not, exactly 3 months before next elections. This may turn to be a very bad idea.
Okay. Well, I think you've given everybody something to think about. Thank you so much. Thank you for your time. Maria Vassilakou, you're a board member of Walk 21 Europe, and we're so pleased to have you. Your experience is so helpful to us and helps so many people I know around the world. But your work with Vienna Solutions and all the other things that you do, I know you're in hot demand, but we do appreciate you spending this hour with us today and sharing with us so many good ideas. We'll write them up, and I hope they'll be watched and shared with people around the world and can benefit from your thoughts. Thank you so much for today.
Thank you. Thank you, Jim.
Okay.